Welcome to this guide on using your Supercarrier to do a Concorde Rogue Analysis Beacon, or better known as a crab. In this guide we're going to be covering what to do before you even undock, finding a crab location, running the crab, as well as what to do if you get tackled in some other situations. And I obviously recommend watching the full video even if you're familiar with some parts of this, as you're quite likely not as good as you think you are, or there's something I'm going to say which is going to end up saving you hundreds of dollars worth of spaceship. If you're interested in the video playing off in the background, that is a cinematic I made years ago called Shattered Dreams, link is in the description, very proud of it. Later on I'll be showing you how to actually run the beacon. While this video focuses on the procedures for PANKRAB, several of the things I show and talk about are transferable to your other alliances, so hopefully everyone can find this a bit helpful. So let's jump into it. First things first is if you are in Horde Alliance, you must join PANKRAB in order to do PvE in a Supercarrier. It is a requirement. You are not allowed to use your Supercarrier for PvE outside of PANKRAB. PANKRAB is the Horde's protection umbrella. When in operation and you follow the rules, your chances of dying are extremely slim, and even if you do, you're going to get SRP. Check the description for a link to the forum page with all the information you need on exactly what PANKRAB is and how to apply, as well as fits and other useful information. I'm going to try and keep things in this video as general as possible, but there are going to be some rules I mentioned which might change, alter, or new rules that get added in the future, so do make sure to read over that entire page, as well as the Discord pin messages in the PANKRAB Discord. One thing I will note though, at the time of recording this, is to PvE in a Supercarrier you must have 3 characters. The first obviously being your super, the second being your Sino, and the third being a response ship. Details on what counts as a response ship are in the link in the description. And before you get started with anything, go ahead and make sure that all 3 of those characters have access to the PANKRAB fleet, as well as have access to the PANKRAB bookmark folder. You're going to need it. The other important thing that I want to mention before we get started is having the correct fit. Now obviously you need to have at least the yellow fit before you're able to join PANKRAB, yellow being our max tank fit, but some people don't seem to understand that you actually have to use this fit. There is a second fit which is optional, is the green fit. This is allowed to be used when we're in green and blue status. This is our max crab fit. For both fits, you may switch out the navigation and tracking mids, but you cannot switch out any tank or obviously the cap boosters. With that out of the way, let's move on to keybinds. I cannot recommend enough setting the following keybinds. Under fighters, change launch all fighters to Control Shift F and recall all fighters to Control Shift R. These will now match your regular drone control commands, except you obviously have to hold control, so you don't have to memorize different commands, and it's kind of intuitive. Next up, you're going to want to set toggle selection 1 through 5 to your 1 through 5 keys, or anything that works for you. Then you're also going to want to do toggle ship selection. This is a very important one. I personally put this on 6, but you can have it on any key that you're going to remember. Finally, head over to navigation. We're going to be setting 2 which are important to every fleet that you're going to be in, so you don't have to fiddle about finding your broadcast buttons. Set broadcast armor to Shift A and broadcast shield to Shift S. Alright, you've sorted all the paperwork, you've got your settings in order, you have a super, you have your response, you have your Sino, you're ready to go out and crab. Wrong. You've got some pre-flight checks to go through. Before undocking, there's some vital things to check. First off, check that you're in the right clone. I recommend renaming your clones so it's very easy to see which one's for what. Here you can see I jump over to my high grade superset, which is also a requirement for joining PK, so you should have these already set up. Second is check your cargo. Make sure you have enough cap boosters, link scripts, mobile depot, and if you were doing crabs the night before, make sure to drop off your loot. There's nothing worse than losing your super with billions of loot inside. And before you even undock your super, first undock your Sino and go look for where you're going to crab. We're going to cover this a bit more later. On your super, make sure that your fit is correct. You should always undock in the yellow fit. Yellow again is our max tank fit. This will protect you if someone attacks you on the other side of a Sino, if you somehow manage to drift off of tether, or as you're anchoring the beacon, you have to be in yellow, so it simply saves you some time later on, otherwise you'll have to switch. The difference between yellow and green is currently only 3 modules, so you don't really have an excuse for not changing. Next, and probably most important of the whole lot, is make sure you have a Sino inhibitor overview set up. Simply create a new overview tab, It must be in a separate window so that it is always visible to you. Head over to Filters and then click Deselect All. Find the Mobile Sino Inhibitor, enable it, and then Save As. Do this for all of your characters. Your super's ready, now it's time to get your response ready. First, join the fleet, see what our current status is, and get in the appropriate ship. In this example, as you can see, we are blue, boof with pulse fit. After switching to my boof clone, I refit my redeemer and then undock and get into an empty spot around the keep star away from the undock. I recommend picking a spot, bookmarking, and then when you undock, warp to and approach it. Approaching the bookmark will stop you getting bumped or drifting off of Teller by mistake if you get into the habit of always approaching that bookmark. If your response ship does not have a jump drive like a Proteus and is a covert ops, you need to get onto the conduit that will always be linked at the bottom of the MOTD. Non-covert ops like Dictors, Hectors and other tackle need to get on the Titan. If using a boof, make sure you're in the correct clone and have the correct weapons attached. The type of response will depend on the status. Make sure to check the MOTD, and when green, unless you're told otherwise, the default response is boof with beams. If you're using a fax as your response, make sure to join the fax channel, it's always linked in the MOTD, and follow the instructions there for joining a fax group. You must be part of a fax group to be counted as a response ship if you're flying a fax. Finally, if you're something that can light a Sino, make sure you've got at least 500 liquid ozone, you never know when we get Sino trapped, and if you've got fuel capabilities, make sure you fill up the rest of your fuel bay with fuel. Next up, and honestly I should have probably put this at the start of the list, is to be in Coalition Mumble. It's mandatory. If you haven't used Mumble for a while, or there's a change in your setup, I recommend doing a local mic check. This is where you press the normal key to talk to people in your local channel. Here you just have to ask mic check, and then people will say that you're good, you're too quiet, way too loud, or whatever else. Another very important thing to check is that you've got your shout key set up. Now very importantly, you do not want to talk when doing a shout test. Simply tap the button, make sure you light up blue in Mumble, and that's you good. You don't want to be talking to the entire fleet when you do a shout check, it's just annoying. I recommend that you sit in Mumble for a few minutes while you're doing your flight checklist, as sometimes the FC might give you an early warning on a status change, saving you a jump or even dropping a beacon. Finally, have all your characters join the fleet, and then double check the MOTD and Discord status page. Make sure the statuses are aligned, and make sure you are allowed to be out ratting during that status. If there is a discrepancy between what's on Discord and what's in the MOTD, simply ask locally in fleet first. If no one responds, ask them if your mic is okay first off, and if no one's still responding, then you can maybe ask the FC. At this point, I'd like to remind you to read the actual rules in the forums and pinned messages on Discord. Rules can change, and as of recording this, you can crab anywhere in the system. You can do it on one of the old crab anchoring locations, which are in most systems, or for a little extra ISK in an anomaly. Other things to be aware of is that there can only be one crab per system, and if we are blue or yellow, you should not be crabbing where there is also a mining fleet. This is called dual gridding, and it is a tough situation to respond to if both you and the mining fleet get targeted at the same time. Additionally, you want to have your probe scanner up as you look for a system. It is illegal to crab in a system with an unidentified wormhole. For regular wormholes, it's a bit more complicated. For those, you have to actually check out the wormhole, see what's inside, see what connections it's got, and obviously the size, so we know what can pass through it. If it goes to a hostile region, you're not allowed to rat in that system until that wormhole has been rolled. Personally, I just avoid wormholes, but if you need a roller, simply ask the FC and they'll give you Paraxis or some other ship that will let you roll that wormhole. In this example here, I check for fleet members in my map, and I find this system, UTAC W4, has no one in it. I confirm it's in super range, and on arriving I see there's an unknown signature. I scan it down and confirm that it is just a combat site. Finally, I check for unis in the system, and we're all clear. A very important note is to be aware of your ranges. Before heading out to UTAC W, I check on my super character if it's actually in super range. If we're green, you can actually go as far as capital range, and during other statuses the FC might choose to say, oh, we are cap range or super range, so you have to be aware of what range you are at from MJ. Personally, I recommend always being in super range, as it removes any kind of complications. Alright, we found a system, and now we need to prepare for our supercarrier to arrive. First, we have to find the spot that we'll actually be using. Like I said earlier, you can use an anomaly to run your crabs. Personally, I prefer to use the crab anchoring location, which is roughly 10k away from the Fortizar. The steps are the same as if doing it in a combat anomaly. Now that we've decided on a spot, if it isn't already bookmarked, bookmark it under PANKRAB, crab pings. Then burn your sino 160 to 210 kilometers away from that location, preferably not in line with any other celestial, and then bookmark there as well. This can easily be done by pressing Q on your keyboard to approach the 200 mark on your tactical overview. It is essential to set these bookmarks to expire. We don't want to be using the same bookmark all the time, and you're just going to clutter up the bookmark folder. I also recommend moving away from this location by probably at least 30 kilometers every day if you're using the same system. Once your bookmarks are set up, right click in space and warp to the tether spot on the Fortizar. It will be on any system that's got a Fortizar system. Light your sino, jump your super, double click in space to break the invulnerability and begin the tethering process, then control space so you don't drift off. Now wait. You must not put your supercarrier into position until after your sino is in position. Once your sino is down, warp it to your perch. In fleet chat, you're going to pre-type CCC and link your system. We'll talk about how to use this later. And once in position, warp your super to the anchoring location. Personally, at this point, I recommend orbiting the anchoring location with your sino and creating some more bookmarks. These will help you get the ideal warp-in position if one side is bubbled or you need to get 120 kilometers away from the sino inhibitor. Now once your super is out of warp, deploy your mobile depot, then deploy your crab. Anchoring your mobile depot takes 1 minute, your crab only 20 seconds. You should already be yellow fit by now, but if you're not, it is essential that you change back to your yellow fit. This is how you just save 40 seconds by staying in yellow when you jumped. Once the beacon has done anchoring, you'll see a link button. Click this and your super will now be locked in place until the linking is complete. This currently takes 4 minutes. During this time, you cannot warp, cannot jump, or even move. You gain a red timer, but you gain 10% more tank, which means if you've been following along and you're in the yellow fit, you're basically unkillable. Linking is called CEQs. You'll have a stack of 3 of them. It takes 7 hours for one of those to recharge, meaning you can link 3 times every 21 hours with one character. CEQs are per character, so to do more beacons you either buy them from the Discord channel CEQ Market or use additional tunes to do the linking process. Dreads, carriers, supers and titans can link. The linking ship must follow the PK rules. For example, it is not allowed to use a dread or carrier to link while we are yellow, as those are not allowed to be on grid. Once the linking is complete, your red timer will start to disappear, and once it's gone you'll have full control of your ship again. You'll notice the circle around the crab has changed from blue to red or yellow, and it also has a timer beside it. Our goal is to get that down to 0. The catch is rats will spawn and pause that timer. When it's red, it's counting down. When it's yellow, it's being paused by rats. As you can see, as my red timer comes to an end, I check in our fleet MOTD if we are still blue. We are, which means I can switch to my green fit. Okay, the rats are here. We have to wait for them all to red box you. This is most important on the first wave, otherwise they may attack your fighters, but it's good practice to do it for every wave. If you do encounter the issue where they are repeatedly attacking your fighters, there's sadly no workaround other than getting out of the ship, logging off, logging back in, and then re-entering the ship. It is worth noting that this bug can be worked around by crabbing inside an anomaly. Deploy your fighters using the keybinds that we set up, and make sure to deselect your ship. It's important to note that every time you open up your cargo or fiddle around with your fighter bay or whatever it may be, it will reselect your ship. This can end up making you move your super when you only intended to move the fighters, so it's good to get into the habit of looking down at your capacitor and making sure it's not highlighted, as that means you've got your super selected. Let's talk a moment about fighters. You're required to carry a certain number of long range, SSF, anti-cap and light fighters. For crabbing, we only make use of the long range and light fighters. There's 3 configurations you can use. That can be 3 lights, 2 long, 2 lights, 3 long, or 1 light, 4 long. Personally, I started with 3-2, but now I use 1-4. I'll show you how to use both, and ultimately it doesn't really matter what configuration you pick, it's just on personal taste and your playstyle. On screen I'm going to show the order in which it's recommended to kill the rats. This is very important for dreads, but as a super it really doesn't matter, and as you'll see during this gameplay, I don't pay attention to it. Once you've deselected your super, attack by pressing F1, and then deselect your short range fighters using the keybinds that we set up. Press Q and double tap near your ship. This will bring your long range fighters back to your ship, and you'll always want to keep these within 5 kilometers of your super at all times. With the 1-4 configuration, you want to have your long range focus on the targets between 20 and 60 kilometers, and then as you get better at controlling your fighters, you'll find it advantageous to pre-move your long range fighters into their optimals before they actually switch to that target. Keep in mind that every time you press F1, your fighters will auto-orbit their target, so you want to actively control your fighters as you rat. With the 3-2 configuration, you want to focus your long-range fighters on the rats that orbit you at 35 kilometers. Without MWDing with your lights, you'll have a hard time keeping up with those, especially if multiple spawn at once. In either configuration, you want to be manually activating your special ability on your light fighters whenever possible, and then using your MWD to reach your next target if they're far enough away. Once the wave is clear, use your keybind that we set up to recall all your fighters. Pop MWD on your lights if it's available and wait for the next wave. It is very good to get into the habit of recalling your fighters every single wave. Here's some general tips. The key to a fast crab is pre-moving your fighters. To speed up getting onto your next target, either Q move towards them, or as a light fighter you can actually press their special ability. That will put them in their orbit without you having to press any other buttons. Like mentioned previously, keep your long range fighters within 5 kilometers of yourself. If you are attacking something that's 60 kilometers away, you can go a little bit outside that towards them, I'd say maybe 7 kilometers, and then you'll be hitting them with perfect hits. If you're targeting something that's 20 to 30 kilometers away from you, go on the opposite side of them on your ship at 5 kilometers on the other side. This will again let you hit at around optimal. So if you're an armor super, before hitting armor, you want to make sure to turn on your links. This small percent of damage mitigation could be the difference between life and death. Just remember that links give you a red timer, so that means that you cannot refit. If we're green or blue and we have to change to yellow, which means you have to change your green fit to a max tank fit, then you must remember to first turn off your links before refitting once the red timer is gone. One very exciting thing about running a crab is there is a chance that you can spawn an officer. This will be an NPC capital ship and be the size of a capital ship, but its EHP will be the same as a battleship. There is no need to switch your fighters into anti-cap, simply keep your normal fighters on and attack it. One important thing is you should not risk going for that officer wreck until after your beacon is done. If your recon warps down to that wreck and there's NPCs in the crab, they will kill that recon very fast. Wait until your crab is done, then only after your supercarrier has warped away and is on tether, warp your recon in and scoop the wreck. One extra tip that I'll give you is carry a salvager in your recon's cargo hold. You can refit off of your supercarrier, replace your covert signal with the salvager, and salvage that wreck. The very first one I did, I got 240 million worth of salvage off of it, so recommend doing that. Just make sure to refit back to whatever you took off. Now while you watch me complete this crab, let's move on to situations and response, and afterwards we'll talk about what happens at the end of a beacon. While crabbing, you can generally ignore hostiles that are travelling through your system, even small gangs. Do not tell the FC every time you see a hostile. However, if anything comes on grid with you and tackles you, first off, remain calm. Panicking will get you killed. Immediately notify the FC, and when shouting to the FC, you should do so with clear, precise words that are informative, giving information on what has tackled you, your system, and what ship you're in. Ideally, you should also confirm whether or not there is a Sino inhibitor. This will probably be the first question the FC asks you. Here's an example of how to call out to an FC. FC, I'm bubbled in OJT, there's around 40 in it in local, and there's Kiki's landing on me now. I'm in Vendetta, I'm at 90% armor. And there is a Sino inhibitor onlining on me, 50 seconds remaining. After that, immediately from your Sino character, hit enter on the pre-type Cs that also link to your system. When hostiles do land on your grid, make sure to pull your fighters back. When you do have hostiles on grid, if there is a Sino inhibitor, try to kill it as soon as possible. A Supercarrier makes quick work of a Sino inhibitor. If there's no Sino inhibitor, if you feel comfortable, you can try taking on other targets. However, you must continue to communicate with the FC. Do not get swept up in trying to control your fighters or do other things. The main thing you have to do is listen to the FC, do what they say, and respond with the information they need in a timely manner. With that said, the best strategy for taking on hostiles on your grid is to pre-lock a target, launch your fighters, hit F1 to fire all your weapons, and then immediately recall those fighters. As soon as they're done reloading, launch them back out and do it again. This will keep your fighters safe while also applying damage to your hostiles. If there is a Sino inhibitor and you do manage to kill it, make sure to tell the FC as soon as it's dead. Then keep a watch for other inhibitors coming online. Ideally, you should notify the FC whenever you lose 10 to 20% of your tank. The number one cause of death in PK is a failure to communicate. Make sure to continue communicating with your FC. And I know it's going to be hard when you've got a bunch of hostiles shooting your really expensive ship, but it is essential that you stay calm. Take a moment, collect yourself, and communicate. At some point while you're tackled, the FC will tell you to CC up with your Sino and a line down. Do so. Only once the FC tells you to, you will warp down to your mobile depot and light a hard Sino. It is very rare for the FC to ask for a covert Sino, but do be aware it could happen. If you're getting dropped by bombers, instead of warping to your depot, you should bookmark their covert Sino with your Sino tune and warp to that bookmark instead at 0. If you do this, there's a high chance we kill every single one of those bombers, and since a covert Sino only lasts 60 seconds, you have to bookmark it with your Sino character as soon as you see it. Upon landing with your Sino, it's very important to remember that you have to double click in space. There's a moment of invulnerability after landing out of warp where you are both untargetable and unable to light a Sino. Double click in space and then hit your Sino. Yell at the FC as soon as your Sino's up. That about covers it for responding when being attacked. Again, I'll say it for the third time, I cannot stress enough, when you are getting attacked, you must remain calm and communicate with the FC. If you do that, your likelihood of survival is drastically increased. So, what about changing colours? Maybe things get too spicy, we lack FCs, we lack eyes, whatever it may be, at any moment we could go red. If it's for lack of FC, lack of eyes, or other reasons that the FC knows about, they will always give you at least 30-minute warning. You have to plan your beacons accordingly so that you're not running a beacon when that red timer runs out. If you go past that red timer, you will not get SRP'd if you were to die. That is regardless if PK is still active. If, however, we've had to go into emergency red, as a supercarrier, you have the luxury of simply warping away. Warp yourself to a tether as soon as possible, and simply leave your beacon behind. The rats will kill your beacon. There's no need to shoot your own beacon. The only thing you really have to worry about as a super is your NSA. Make sure you start cycling out red so that you can warp away as soon as possible. Alright, let's get back to our crab. Once your beacon's timer reaches 0, the highlight will disappear and you will have 2 minutes to open up the beacon and collect your loot. Do not worry if you miss it. After that's up, it explodes and drops 100% of its loot in a wreck. It's important to note that rats from the beacon will continue to spawn until the beacon has self-destructed. In time, you'll learn to optimize cycling of your NSA and links to turn off after the final wave arrives so that you can still lock them up, but you can warp off as soon as they're dead. Now that I've collected the loot here, you can see a final pretty large wave spawns. I'd kill them for that little bit extra ISK, and then before warping away, I refit back to my tank fit. Now, it's not a big deal if you end up warping away in your green fit. If you're leaving your mobile depot, simply warp back and then refit as soon as you land. It's not going to save that much time refitting now versus there, but I prefer to do it so that if anything were to happen in between, you're already in the right fit. If you're done with beacons for the day, obviously pick up your mobile depot, otherwise you can leave it there to warp back to later on. Once you're ready, warp to the Sino tether spot at 10, just in case there's another supercarrier or capsule there. Allow your ship to regen, and once ready, warp back to your mobile depot and you can begin your next run. It's worth reminding you that when you warp back, it is essential to get back in range of your mobile depot. Since you warp kind of in a 5-ish kilometer bubble around your warp point, there's a chance that you arrive on the opposite side, similar to how I have just now. I arrived 3.5 kilometers away from my mobile depot, but I want to make sure that I'm in pickup range of it, so I go within the 2.5 kilometers to be able to pick it up. And that's us. We're done. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully this was useful, especially to those new to PANKRAB and running crab beacons. Do let me know if I've missed anything in the comments section, or if in time this becomes outdated, let me know and I might create an updated one. And just to be the cliche YouTuber, if you can, please give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more EVE Online. That's it from me. Happy crabs.